Yeah, and we're saying very clearly that if you want to get the jab or you don't want to get the jab is a matter of personal choice, right? But the Helsinki Accord, the Nuremberg Declaration, all say that people are entitled to informed consent. Now, this is an Australian government report published by the Australian government. It's not something that we've come up with, and people are entitled to their full informed consent. And all we're doing really, and all Craig Kelly's doing, is saying, true to his oath of office, that he'll protect and defend the rights of all Australians. Now, you know, if there are serious side effects by these vaccines, and I would point out these are reports to the TGA by physicians and others about deaths that have taken place following the receipt of the vaccines. And that's all they are, and that's all the report says. But people are entitled to know what the truth is, because the media won't tell them. And the media has been threatened with the loss of their advertising contracts. John Skerritt wrote to I think we put some ads on one of the local radio stations you saw a few weeks back. He wrote a letter to them telling them that the TGA wouldn't do it, and then immediately gave them a very lucrative advertising contract so that we couldn't get any airtime. And, you know, it's unprecedented in this country where you get the government saying that they will threaten the freedom of the press, the rights of people to know, by withholding government money for their advertising. And you get media owners who may need that money instructing their journalists that they can't run articles, they can't be critical of the government, that there isn't any fair reporting anymore in this country. So what do you do? Craig Kelly's, as an elected member of the people, has sent a tweet in closing, nothing more, no comments, but our government report, so people can have informed consent. I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's very commendable, and I'll be certainly supporting Mr Kelly with all my resources, for sure, to defend his right to freedom of speech and the rights of all Australians to make an informed choice.
Has John Skerritt, has his lawyers been in touch with you? Have your lawyers been in touch with him, or is it this is all?
No, well, John Skerritt lawyers haven't been in touch with me, or I don't think Mr Kelly, but we've seen the threats that John's made. Right? Certainly, John has written me a letter which I responded to. I think I released that a few weeks ago, but. Yeah, simple facts are that Mr Kelly hasn't broken any law, that freedom of speech, despite the lockdowns, exists in Australia, that a different point of view should be given. And of course, you know, we know from freedom of information and other reasons that there's been no COVID samples in Australia that they've been able to calibrate testing by, that they've relied on overseas studies and overseas things provided by pharmaceutical companies. And more concerning to me personally is the fact that both Pfizer and AstraZeneca would not allow their products to be sold in Australia unless the Australian government gave them a full indemnity. That if they killed anyone or maimed them, they wouldn't be responsible, the government would be. So I find that a very disturbing thing, that the government didn't take the view and say, well, if you're confident in your product, you should stand behind it.
Clive, what would you say right now to the people of Sydney, New South Wales, 1,600 cases, 1,800 cases a day, whatever they're up to at the moment? It's horrible what's going on, and there's people dying in hospital.
Yeah, well,
we've seen people die in hospital. They're not dying of fake disease, they're dying of COVID-19. You're up here today, it's irresponsible.
Well, I don't believe that, you know.
But what would you say to those business owners that can't open their business because
I would say it's terrible.
Their Premier's telling them that the only way out is a double jab, and that's what they've been told.
Yeah, I'd say that Premier's lying to them. I'd say that she's under an ICAC inquiry, that a particular lobbyist in Sydney controls the Liberal Party in Sydney and has told her that the only way she gets out of that inquiry is if she pushes the double jab, and that his clients are AstraZeneca and his clients are Pfizer. That's what I'd say.
That's political. What about the business owner that's being told he can't open his doors until he double jabs?
If you let me answer your question, I'll answer it.
You're just answering with ICAC
that's what
politics.
You asked me.
About people that are trying to open their businesses, people that live in border towns that are told they have to double jab.
Well, if you don't want me to answer the question, you know, I'll answer the question to start with. That's what I'd tell them, and I'd say that what the Premier's telling them is not true, and that policy shouldn't be locked down. Businesses should be open, and the government's using this as an excuse to destroy them, and they know that.
Do you think that the Premier of New South Wales wants to destroy business?
I do.
Why would she do that?
Because
it's their economy.
Because she, as I tried to explain to you, that she's being directed by a lobbyist in Sydney who's being paid by AstraZeneca and by Pfizer tens of millions of dollars to get these policies through to make sure the vaccine is pushed. That's why. You asked the question, I gave you the answer. And that's my personal knowledge. And I'm happy to make a statement here to police or to anyone if they want to know what's going on. But that's all. I'll be doing that, but they'll be named. But not only that. What's more important, as I said, 46,000 people, 20,000 from the western suburbs of Sydney, has decided to join our party. And we do live in a democracy in Australia at the moment, and there is an election coming up, and the government, the federal government, will be held account. I'll just see if there's anyone else who wants to ask a question.
Yeah, have you been vaccinated yourself?
No.
No, and you won't be vaccinated?
Definitely not, no.
And is the policy of the United Parliament Party to stop the rollout altogether? Is that what you would like to see?
Well, I think in Australia we've got a very good system of approvals normally for vaccines over a 10-year period normally, a 7 to 10-year period. And one of the major requirements is that there is substantial safety data at 2, 3 and 5 years. The other requirement is that there's safety studies for testing in pregnant women and for children. There's been no studies done of any of these vaccines. And what I'm in favour of is protecting that approval system. That's what I'm in favour of. I'm saying if a vaccine hasn't gone through those approvals, we shouldn't be willy-nilly putting it into the whole population. That's my point of view. But everybody, including members of our party, are entitled to their own opinion.
That's a good point Clive comes up with. It really is about guidelines. And if we lower these guidelines and we lower these standards, how can these companies, just because they're a pharmaceutical company doesn't mean they've got our best interests at mind. At the end of the day, profit becomes before everything. If you can't pay your workers' wages, how can you carry on the business? Lucky for them, half their workforce is probably bloody robots putting pills in a bloody jar. Not only that, Clive made an allegation that I haven't heard before. He's said that that the Premier of Sydney is obviously brought out, and she's having to push these mandates, and because she has been bought out. And then the guy came up with a straw man argument. Well, I'm kind of looking into the straw man argument myself. I really haven't.
Do you think that the Premier of New South Wales wants to destroy business?
I do.
Why would she do that?
Because
it's her economy.
Because she, as I tried to explain to you, that she's being directed by a lobbyist in Sydney who's being paid by AstraZeneca and by Pfizer tens of millions of dollars to get these policies.
Now, could that be possible? Imagine if someone had got to our Premier's inner circle, found something and bribed these people. Now these people have to push their agenda. Could that be possible? Another thing that I heard, and this could be a good argument, the government want to keep on pushing the virus out because the longer that the virus is drawn out, the longer we can figure out how we're going to deal with China, because China's trying to get the Belt Road project up and going. They're losing money every day that doesn't continue. So, I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Anyhow, I'm Shane187 kicking it with you. You're kicking with me, and we are out.
Their Premier's telling them that the only way out is a double jab, and that's what they've been told.
Yeah, I'd say their Premier's lying to them. I'd say that she's under an ICAC inquiry, that a particular lobbyist in Sydney controls the Liberal Party in Sydney and has told her that the only way she gets out of that inquiry is if she pushes the double jab.